As we count down to the union budget, we are bringing you exclusive interactions with business leaders from various sectors, and we are also looking at the expectations that different segments of India Inc. have from the Finance Minister. Now, as a part of this special series, Ranojay Banerjee caught up with the Managing Director of Mahindra & Mahindra, Pawan Goenka. Here's a slice of his conversation with him on the budget wish list, as well as other key issues facing the auto sector.
Thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Let's talk about electric vehicles, and because now there's a lot of traction, there's a lot of momentum. The government was thinking that we should move to all electrics by 2030. SIAM now in their white paper has sought more time, 17 years more time, 2047. How do you weigh in 2030 versus 2047?
Well, let me first say, Ranojay, that it's great that finally India is becoming serious about electric vehicles. As you know that me personally, Mahindra has been talking about EVs for 7 years. And now everybody is looking at EVs and getting into it as a user, as a provider or seller of technology or vehicles. 2030, 2047, 2050, 2040, all kinds of numbers are thrown right now. I think the important thing is to see what it means to go from here to there. Today we are selling no more than 100 vehicles a month as a country. Being 100% electric means selling, in today's context, 3 million vehicles. Okay. And by 2030, that 3 million will become 4.5 million, 5 million, and so on and so forth. We have to look at what is a pace that can be managed. Okay. There are lots of positives of electric vehicles to come in. Positives, as we know, air quality, positives, as we know, reducing oil import. There are also some consequences of electric vehicles coming in. And we need to balance the two. The consequences are that IC engines are completely localized over the years. Right? If you go back 20 years, we were importing 50% content. If you look today, we are probably importing 2% content. Right? Electric vehicles are largely imported today in terms of components that go in. If we try and move too rapidly, we would export jobs. If we move in too rapidly, we'll export investment. We will import a lot of things. And therefore, we need to find the right balance. And our pace of growth should be consistent with the pace at which we can support local manufacturing, localization of electric vehicles. If this can happen at the rate of getting 2030, fine.
But is 2030 enough time for us to make that gradual transition, is what you're saying?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because today, see, there are two factors. The factors that come, or there are three things that are needed to make electric vehicles create a natural pull. The subsidies that we have today cannot last forever. Once the volumes go up, subsidies become very expensive for the government. And government cannot afford to continue these kind of subsidies, and therefore we have to assume that subsidies will taper down with time. Right? So there are 2 or 3 factors that have to come in to make electric vehicles create a natural pull. Other than the fact that we need the charging infrastructure, for sure. Other than the fact that the range has to go up in the vehicles, for sure. But the cost has to come down. Okay. The cost will come down because A, the technology is becoming less expensive, battery costs are going down globally, and that certainly helps. B, we'll get benefit of scale. Right now, with the kind of volumes that we have, the cost per unit is very high. Scale will help us. And number 3, to localize everything. Right. And therefore, I think these 3 things have to happen.
So you're saying 2030 is still, is still not, I mean, it's still pretty much in the immediate horizon, and therefore it could lead to sort of dislocation. Indian suppliers may not be able to sort of, create the local, capabilities, and therefore what you're saying is it could lead to perhaps India exporting jobs. As you...
This is how I see it today. But the right time to talk is not today, because we're just starting, and we are all sort of groping in the dark, guessing what will happen. Let's wait for 2-3 years. See where we are. See what kind of volumes we start getting. See what kind of localization starts happening. See what kind of technology thrust comes into India. See what kind of user-based development happens. How the infrastructure gets set up. So we are right now just at the beginning of the journey of electric vehicles. And to project that in a certain time frame, whether that time frame is 2030, 2040, 2050 will become all electric, it's just a sort of throwing dart in the dark. We need to really have a full well-balanced, well-defined program to make it happen.
You know, in fact, the government, we understand is also thinking about possibly moving the entire central government fleet, to electric. In fact, I asked that question to Mr. Mahendra also, and he said you should be given the credit for it because it was your idea that you had given to the government, saying that why don't you think on those lines, because that would be radical. I mean, if at all that happens, that would also give a big boost to the EV, the EV ambition of companies like yours.
Yeah, see, a lot can happen if one doesn't worry about who gets credit for it. It's not one person who can make things happen. It's sort of the whole ecosystem has to work together. With the ESL order, I mean, in some sense, I keep repeating it that a lot of things are changing about electric vehicles because for the first time there is a substantial volume which is real, and everybody is looking at that volume very seriously, right? That would definitely, but I must say that electric vehicles have to deliver and perform. So vehicles that we're delivering to for these orders, they must live up to the expectation of the consumers or the people who finally use them in terms of the range, in terms of reliability, in terms of comfort, because nobody wants to compromise with the kind of vehicle that they drive. So that's a given. Nobody's going to do that. But with the various programs in place, I'm very hopeful that we will see a fast ramp up. The only thing I put again, I'm repeating, caution, that the ramp up should not be faster than the ecosystem of local technology and local manufacturing that we can create. And same amount of effort needs to be put in to creating that ecosystem as we are putting in creating demand.
Since you mentioned EESL, but there have been some issues. I mean, the manner in which the whole bid, the bids have happened, changing of specifications at the last moment. There seems to be some amount of, sort of bad blood associated with this. You've gone on record to say you mentioned to me when you went on record to say that Mahindra, you would not be making money, on the cars that you're going to supply to EESL. I mean, what's going on? I mean, will you, for instance, perhaps participate in the next round of bids if the prices are at this level?
See, this is first time anything like this has been done, right? Just like when we make a first vehicle, there are a lot of things that happen that we don't anticipate. For ESL, when they are trying to buy these vehicles in bulk, a lot of things are happening that they perhaps didn't anticipate. So they have to get the vehicle registered, they have to have a system by which the vehicles get serviced, they have to have users, what kind of agreement they have, agreement they have, because ESL is basically a consolidator, right? So I think that has taken a little longer than what they had anticipated, and therefore the delivery of the vehicles have been somewhat delayed. I believe that they have now taken 6 vehicles delivery from Mahindra already, and the next 50 are just around the corner. And once we do that, that will happen in Delhi. The next batch of 100, which is waiting to be delivered, will happen in other parts of India. The order for phase 2, which is the 4,500 odd, that I'm expecting to get a letter from ESL soon on whether Mahindra will participate and match the bid of L1 bidder. We have done a lot of work on cost in the meantime between the first bid and the initial bid and now. And we will be taking a call as soon as we receive the letter on how much can we participate in that.
So you have managed to sort of shave off some costs.
We have done few things like, I had mentioned to you that our vehicle was slightly over-spec'd. Not slightly over-spec'd, was over-spec'd compared to what the ESL tender was. And therefore we will be meeting the tender requirement. And that will help us to save some cost. Once we have a large volume that is guaranteed, then we are able to negotiate better prices with suppliers. So all of that put together, we will then see where everything works out to be and take a call. So we're waiting for the formal invitation from ESL to participate in phase 2, which should be coming any time. And once that comes, then we'll make the final call.
So in all likelihood, you possibly
we certainly would participate. How many vehicles we have to decide?
That you'll have to decide. This time we have the budget in less than a month's time, and this could well be the one final budget. Well, next it's at best going to be an interim budget. Now indirect taxes is out of the question now because of the GST. What more can the budget do what would your sort of wish list be? What would you look forward to? What is the broader message you would you would want to hear from the finance
So you're
minister.
right that with the GST in place, a lot of the sort of excise going up and down every budget, that's
So
gone
no
away.
SUV
So
tax
that's,
extra, so
that's well, we
something
have
that
enough
you would
tax.
always be a little
We
worried
already
about.
have 48%.
Yeah,
We already have
precisely.
48%. But there are 2 or 3 things that we need to look at, and there's not so much about auto industry or tractor industry, because there mostly it used to be excise duty, and that is sort of outside the ambit of the budget now. So there's not so much about that, though industry is still hoping that we get to 2 GST rates, but that won't happen in the budget. If that happens, that will happen in the GST Council. And this used car problem that we have talked about many times, again, that's not a budget issue, it's a GST Council issue.
Yeah.
But when I look at budget at a very sort of macro level, there are 2 or 3 things that come to my mind that the budget has to, I think, address. One is the fiscal deficit. Given that we have already consumed 112% of fiscal deficit up to November, whether it's prudent to try and restrict to 5.2 or whether we should go to 5.5 for this year, only 1 year, is something that I think I'm sure that the finance ministry and finance minister is thinking through carefully, because there is a balancing that we need to do of growth and the fiscal deficit discipline that we had brought in. India is the only country, I think, that since 2012 every year the fiscal deficit has gone down, and perhaps we can afford to take a pause, and this year.
So
for
you're saying
FY18.
there is leeway, for some
I think
sort of
so.
slacking
I
on
think
the
so, because
fiscal
I think we
deficit
need to
front.
get some growth going. There has been a little bit of disruption in the government revenues because of GST coming in and a lot of things happening in GST. I think by next year it will stabilize. And I do believe that GST revenue will be higher than the revenue that had come from excise and VAT regime. That's my belief, though I don't have numbers.
Okay.
And therefore, I think for this year alone, only for this year, it probably will be prudent, in my view, and I'm not an economist, but in my view, to relax the fiscal deficit, the 5.2 target to 5.5. Second thing that needs to happen is rural and agri. Okay. Now, this government has put in a lot of effort, a lot of initiatives to help rural India, to help agriculture. But for a variety of reasons, we are still not there. And still we need to have loan waivers and stuff like that, which cause disruption, which has its own set of problems that it brings in. And therefore, focus on rural economy, focus on agriculture is important. And what do you do for that? The biggest thing is to improve market linkages, to see what we can do with price mechanism, and get more money to the farmers. Giving subsidy is not the way. Giving loan waiver can only fix a symptom, cannot fix the problem. We have to take care of that. So I think something has to happen there. The direct benefit transfer is very good. We need to make that even stronger. The insurance, crop insurance, is step in the right direction. We need to make it much stronger. So there will be impetus. There will be thrust on agriculture. Has to be. There will be thrust on rural economy. Has to be. Okay. The third thing, and that I hope that the Honorable FM is thinking about that very seriously, is corporate tax. Okay. Over the years, last 2 or 3 years, for large companies or large groups like Mahindra, many of the deductions have been taken away, as was said in the budget. But the tax rate remains the same. And as a result of that, our effective tax rate actually is going up every year. If you look at our announced P&L over the last 2-3 years, you will find that. And I think the headline rate has to come down. And especially with the US passing the corporate tax reduction bill, I think there will be a lot of competitive pressure also on India to see how we also bring down our pressure. And there was supposed to be a 25% in phases. So I think that roadmap has to be announced. That will be one of my biggest sort of ask, if I could say that, in this budget. So if I look at the fiscal deficit, the rural and agri focus, and these will be the 2 or 3 major things that I will look at.
So you are essentially then saying that, some sort of an indirect stimulus. I mean, whether you're, when you're saying, some kind of, if you're willing, some leeway on the fiscal deficit front, then maybe invest more in infrastructure for which indirectly you benefit rural there's a spin-off benefits, and of course corporate tax rate.
Right. The fourth one that you just mentioned, which I had missed, is the hard infrastructure.
Yeah.
The road, which is a very big multiplier for economy, the railways, and ports, this infrastructure, housing, the low-cost housing, which has been a very important initiative of this government, probably needs to get a little bit more thrust. Post-GST, post-RERA, the housing sector is under some distress. I think to do something to bring that back on top, especially low-cost housing, will be sort of solving many problems. Will be solving the housing problem for low middle-class income. Will be solving the economy boost problem, and will get into money into infrastructure.